I just want to do God's will.
The kind of revolution that the world needs is a Christian revolution.
If you want a miracle, you've got to expect it to happen.
You are the recipients of God's grace and God's blessings, and you rejoice in that reality.
Welcome to Life Today Live. I'm Randy Robinson. Great to have you here today, and we're going to have a conversation I've been wanting to have for a while, but it's been a little bit of a challenge addressing it, with guests who are informed and also coming from the spiritual perspective that most of us are coming from, which is a Christian worldview. The topic is artificial intelligence, and I don't know how much you know about it, but what I have seen, had firsthand experience with, both excites me and frightens me all at the same time. So we're going to talk about AI. What does it mean to you and me? And I have a couple of wonderful, qualified guests to discuss this. Tim Wyatt is a freelance journalist. His articles have appeared in everything from The Guardian, The Times, The Economist, Sunday Telegraph, Independent, as well as the BBC. He's in Oxford right now in England. And his father is John Wyatt. He is a doctor, author, speaker, and research scientist, and they're more than qualified to discuss this. They have a couple of things I want to mention. They have a podcast on the Premier Network called Matters of Life and Death that they do together, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that and how to find it. And then Tim hosts the Premier Christian Newscast, also on the Premier Network. And so coming from London and from Oxford today, John and Tim Wyatt, great to have both of you on the program. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's good. It's very good to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, looking forward to it.
So, John, we'll start with you because I know you've put a lot of thought and research into this as the senior researcher at the Faraday Institute for Science and Religion in Cambridge. This is, I'm sure, something that you have been looking at for a while. Just start a little bit with the basics about what artificial intelligence can do and why, as Christians, we need to approach it not just from a technical standpoint, but really from a theological standpoint.
Yeah, so it is. It's a really important and fascinating area. I think, it's interesting to know that this idea of machines that become human-like, that can talk to us, that can think, that can act, this idea has been around in science fiction for 100 years or more. And people have been speculating about, is it ever going to be possible? Are computers ever going to get powerful enough? But actually what we're now seeing just in the last few years is it feels like science fiction is coming true, that an enormous amount of effort and energy is going in labs around the world, especially in Silicon Valley, in the States, to try to make computer power take over and replicate what the human brain is capable of. And, it feels to me a bit like the Manhattan Project back in the Second World War, when the whole resources of the state were being used to try to develop nuclear weapons because of the threat from Nazi Germany and the Japanese. And in the same kind of way, there is a sort of huge concentration of resources going on now, but it's not being directed by the state. It's actually being directed by capitalism, really, by market forces, because there are huge business opportunities here. And so companies are pouring billions into making new and more powerful machines. And we're seeing these machines. I think a lot of people have heard of ChatGPT, which is a chatbot that you can just type any question in, and it speaks back to you as though there's a human being there. And this comes under the heading of generative AI. And as people look into the future, it's predicted this is going to get more and more powerful. It's going to be able to create not just voices, not just text. It's going to be able to create music. It's going to create video. It's going to be able to reproduce and do remarkable things. And There's a huge positive benefit here. I mean, I'm particularly interested in healthcare. I can see all sorts of positive things happening in healthcare. But at the same time, I think it's pretty obvious there are huge worries, particularly in terms of what evil people can do with this kind of powerful technology.
I'm just waiting for my laptop to say, I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that. Tim, as you've been sort of exploring this, writing about it, talking about it, what concerns do you have when it comes to AI and the potential uses of it?
I did a really fascinating piece a few months ago, looking at the people trying to use AI in the church. People are taking this idea of ChatGPT. It can write things. Could it write a sermon? Could it choose my songs? Could it choose the prayers we're going to say at church on Sunday? Some people might recoil in horror at the idea, but there are Christians right now who are experimenting with this. And one of the things that came up really clearly when I was doing that research is that this is the kind of the bar to entry is low. Anyone right now can just, if you have an internet connection, you know how to use a search engine, you can go and find a chatbot, and most of them are just free to use. And so this doesn't take, you don't have to be a coding whiz. This is open to anyone, good pastors, slightly less good pastors, to just play around with. But some of the real concerns that came out when I was talking to experts in this field was questions around, to what extent can God speak to us, through a sermon that was written not by a human being, filled with the Holy Spirit, meditating on scripture, but by a chatbot. Some people say it's just another tool. It's just like using Google or a concordance, but actually there are a lot of theologians, a lot of technical experts as well, who are saying there's a significant difference between the human being listening, reflecting, God speaking through them, and something like ChatGPT, which might have access, to every Bible translation that's ever been produced, every commentary that's ever been written, but all it can do is hash together other people's thoughts. And often, as people will know, if they use these tools, they're not perfect. They get things wrong. Unlike Google, you might put in something, I tried it out. I said, can you share me a Tim Keller quote on the sovereignty of God? And it shared 3 or 4 of them. And I searched, and 2 of them completely made up, don't appear in any of his written works, not in his sermons. They sounded good. They sounded realistic. They sounded like they could be true. But as far as I could tell, Tim Keller never said them. So there's a real questions around, can we trust these tools, as seemingly powerful as they are, in something as significant as, a worship service?
Good question. What do you think? Do you have any personal thoughts on it?
Do you know what? I actually swivel from side to side. I really do. I know
too.
That's really unsatisfying, but I do. I can see the power of them. I can understand if you're a hard-pressed pastor, it's a lot of work. But I think ultimately, if you put a gun to my head, I think we need to be really, really careful. Yeah. Really careful, because I think there is something about, Christianity is a faith of words. Jesus came to us as the Word, and we have to be really careful what words we're using and where these words come from. And so, particularly when it comes to, speech and sermons and prayers and worship, I personally would err on the side of caution before kind of jumping into this brave new world.
Interesting. All right. I am in Texas, but we will hold no guns to your head today. So you're safe to speculate. John, as a doctor, you mentioned some of the potential benefits, and we, with ChatGPT, I think people are at least heard of that. What I think a lot of people don't know is that it's already there on the audio side, on the voice side. Someone here recently made a book promo for a book using my voice, promoting this book in just ridiculous terms, braggadocious, talking about I never wrote the book and I never said these words, but I played that audio for my wife. And she was like, why would you do that? Why did you say that? And I was like, I didn't say any of this. It was my voice sampled. And I know the video is coming. Some people can already do it. But we're going to get to the point where you won't be able to believe anything you see online or on TV. How do we balance the potential benefits, like you've seen, with these potential just lies? Essentially, somebody can make a lie.
Yeah, and this is really concerning, isn't it? Because I think to use a different analogy, the genie's out of the bottle. There's no way we can stop this now. These things are on open release. As Tim says, you don't need to have any coding expertise. And therefore, whether we like it or not, this is now a reality of the internet world that we're never going to be able to trust whether or not an advert, a video, a news clip, whether it's real or not. And I'm afraid really horrific things are already happening. I mean, there's been, in the UK, there's been some real concern about TikTok videos of young girls where a face is being put onto a naked body. And there are these naked videos of young girls, and schoolboys are using these and passing them around. And, the ability to simulate, to simulate horrific things. Another concern that scandals about that we've had in the UK, as in many places around the world, some terrible tragedies where young children have been killed because of abusive parents or other phenomena, and there are videos circulating where these young children who are dead have been recreated and are telling their stories in their own words. It's just sort of horrific, really, about what can be done. And therefore, it's very hard to see where this is going. But I think the first thing we have to recognize, therefore, is that, as you say, we can trust nothing. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because one of the things that makes me feel is yes, media like this, international media, is amazingly powerful. YouTube, TikTok, the internet, and so on. But actually, if you want to be absolutely certain that what you're experiencing is real, you have to meet people face to face. There is no substitute for face-to-face, embodied, meeting together, and particularly in church, in a Christian community, where you eyeball someone in the flesh and you say, is this true? Are you real? Is this what you think? Because you're not going to be able to trust anything else.
Yeah, here in the States, when Donald Trump was running for president in 2016, there were accusations of a videotape that existed with a prostitute in Russia, kind of thing, right? And like the news media was touting, we had, but they could never produce the video, and so we go, okay, well, you're just making that up, or it doesn't exist. I think you could produce the video now these days, which is really disturbing because you look at the political power, and it could be Russian hacks or Chinese hacks impacting UK elections or US elections, Canadian elections. I mean, the fact that we are on the cusp and arguably already there, that you really can't believe your own eyes when it comes to the screen, I think demands the spiritual response, which is discernment. I'm curious, Tim, if you've really, put much thought into what it's going to require, not just as a intelligent human being, but as a Christian, as a believer, when it comes to discerning the spirits is if that's the abuse of Scripture, but how do we discern what is true in a world that is potentially so easily deceptive?
I think you put your finger on something really important there about discernment, because as you say, as we go into a world where we can no longer so easily trust what we're seeing, what we're hearing, the ability to act wisely. I've been reading a bit of Ephesians recently in our church, and Paul keeps talking about the contrast between foolishness and wisdom, and that was true in the first century, but I think it's going to be so much more true. This is the spiritual gift we all need to be praying for, is wisdom, discernment and wisdom. As a journalist, I'm particularly concerned about how easy it is, you mentioned, to fabricate videos. We're on the cusp now where world events could be shaped by, fake news and malicious kind of news outlets, kind of twisting the truth. And as a kind of, my profession is supposed to be telling the truth, right? And so it is a massively concerning time. And I think, on a practical level, I think it's really vital that we as Christians are equipping ourselves. So we're not all going to be tech experts, but let's get wise and understand what is out there, what is possible, what are the telltale signs that this video we're scrolling past on social media might be manipulated or disinformation. That yes, they can be excellent, but often with a bit of low-level detective work, we can actually be much more clued up as to what is fake, what is real, or even what is likely to be real, what is likely to be fake. So there's a practical job there, but I think you're right. The spiritual job as believers is to lean into discernment. And that's ultimately, I think, a gift of the Spirit, fruit of the Spirit. And that's something we need to be praying, need to be discipling ourselves, we need to be asking God for, because this is going to be a very confusing, potentially quite a tumultuous time in coming decades.
Yeah. At the same time, I don't want us to become, we have potential to do some good things as believers for the faith. And I don't want us to become so afraid of the technology that we don't get a handle on it in the church as well. And John, you had mentioned, we touched on some of the medical potential benefits, but what other benefits do you possibly see of embracing artificial intelligence and using it in the right way?
Yeah, I do think there are remarkable possibilities here. And there are also some technical solutions. Some of the problems that we're talking about have happened because the technology is still at a very early stage, and the possibility of putting in safety locks and so on so far hasn't been explored. But there's very active work going on, for instance, in putting in hidden watermarks into videos, into audio, into pictures, which can't be faked and which will prove one way or another whether this is genuine or not. So I think there are technological advances coming. Similarly, this problem where these chatbots sometimes just go completely haywire and talk a load of rubbish, and that is a technical problem which is being actively addressed, and it's likely that new generations of technology will make them much more reliable. So I think there are technical solutions, and I think the idea that we could have available to us a reliable source of information which effectively is able to explain anything you would like on any topic in any kind of entertaining way that can generate new ideas, new information. I think potentially that's a very, very powerful tool. In healthcare, for instance, I think it's going to be possible to have effectively on a smartphone available to anyone in the world the kind of sophisticated medical information and diagnostic power that at the moment you need as sort of consultant in a major center. I think it actually is going to be possible to distill down extremely sophisticated, complex medical information in a way that is going to be available across the world. And that doesn't solve all the problems, but it's actually potentially a really powerful new tool, reducing medical mistakes, providing reliable health information for people around the world. So I do see very powerful tools here. And also even in Bible study, in theological analysis, of having someone, quotes, this machine that could actually explain to you in a reliable, helpful way what particular verses mean, what concepts are, that I think there is real potential there. So I think, going back to a sort of spiritual thing, it's not that technology is either all good, and we just say, isn't it wonderful, or it's just totally evil. But I think what we need to learn is, how do we redeem this technology? The way I see it is that the technology has a kind of bent towards the dark side. It's interesting. It's the same about the way the Bible talks about mammon, about wealth, that wealth in itself is dangerous. That's why the Bible calls it godless mammon. It sort of has this corrupting power, but it can be redeemed and used for good. And in the same way, I see that's what this powerful technology is like. It does have this, but because it's powerful, it always has this corrupting potential. But by God's grace, we can learn to redeem it, to bring it back out of the hands of the evil one and use it for good.
Well, no, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that is the hope. I will add, though, that a chatbot speaking rubbish arguably makes it more human. I can see that. But Tim, I'm curious, have you come across any uses that Christians would say, oh, that's a wonderful use of AI. I can get on board with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was waiting for my dad to say it, actually, because it's actually in the medical world, one of the most exciting ones is they've been training some of these computer software. They're called kind of machine learning algorithms that lie behind the chatbots, and on how to do things like look at scans, scans of the brain or of lung scans. And often it takes many years of study for a doctor to kind of figure out, to be able to read these scans and identify and diagnose cancers, early tumors and growth like that. And as far as I understand, there are some really promising early signs that they've been able to train algorithms to do as good, sometimes a better job of looking at these medical scans and saying, actually, that needs to be reassessed. That's a potential growth. And I think that's just a really exciting, small scale, but exciting example of how you could take something that is previously very expensive and time consuming, having a doctor who spent 10 years training at X, thousands of dollars per hour, or you could just feed all these scans for free into the computer software, and you could radically speed up diagnosis and hopefully catch a lot of these conditions there. That's one small example, which I think no one could be opposed to that. That's a really powerful way that this could be a tool that could really kind of boost human flourishing.
Yeah, and I know that with the missions work that we do overseas, our organization does a lot of work to have that sort of expertise, if you will, in these underdeveloped countries. Exactly. Hugely valuable. Have you seen any positive benefits just on an evangelism side or a study side, something that is more within the church that's been applied in a positive way?
Yeah,
I think this is a kind of growth area where sorry to speak over you, Tim, but it's. I think this is exactly where the research is just being done at the moment. Okay. I'm part of a big research establishment called Tyndale House in Cambridge, which does a lot of biblical studies, analysis of manuscripts, and we're actively talking about introducing AI into ways of examining original manuscripts, finding, comparing, organizing information, making it available again to people around the world in a very accessible and easy form. I think we're going to see a growth of these kind of biblical Christian theological tools, which are trustworthy and reliable, and which make really valuable information easily available, the sort of stuff which you would need to have a Bible scholar or a theologian. Yeah. Potentially we can have instantly available.
Yeah. You seen anything, Tim?
Yeah, I was going to say I've been speaking to some pastors who have been experimenting with using chatbots, not to write the whole sermon, because that seems a step too far and is a bit risky if it accidentally introduces some falsehood, but maybe using it to generate some kind of Bible study questions off the back of your sermon, or people who said it's a really helpful tool to kind of brainstorm. You could ask it, what kind of questions do people tend to have when they read this passage of scripture, and use that as inspiration for you to go away for your own personal study when you're preparing a sermon. So I think, I'll lay my cards on the table. I maybe a bit more than my dad. I'm a bit more of a skeptic of some of the kind of grandiose, revolutionary claims of AI. I'm not massively sure that in 5 years' time these kind of godlike computer software programs will be running the world. But what it clearly is incredibly powerful at doing is the kind of brute force pattern recognition, like understanding medical scans, or, looking through 1 million pages of text and pulling out the exact right sentence you need. And I think some of those when applied to study of the scriptures, to church context, are going to be really quite transformational.
Yeah, and I see some of it being used in the way you would use some of the study tools that already exist, but much quicker, such as, you talked about Ephesians. Well, give me the cultural and historical setting of Ephesians so that I can understand it better quickly, and there you go. A Chatgpt or something like that could provide quick resources that you could then implement into a sermon. We're also, a friend of mine, we're looking at using some AI possibly for translations into many languages quickly. And so to be able to get, spiritual resources around the world in native languages and dialects is really exciting. So I see a lot of positive benefits. Final thoughts from both of you on just sort of how Christians can continue to move into this technological age and the advancements in a wise way.
I think it's really important for people to remain informed. I think one of the sad things is that I think a lot of Christian people just don't want to go there. It's like it's just too complicated, too difficult. And I think it's part of our responsibility. God calls us to be salt and light in the place in which he's placed us. And if God has placed us in this technological world, then we have a responsibility to try to understand at least what is my calling. How can I be salt and light in the place where I am? The other thing I think is that there are a surprising number of Christians actually working in the tech industries. There are many thousands of believers working in big companies, in small startups and so on. And, we have a responsibility as Christians to try to support them, to encourage them, to help them to see their role as being a salt and light actually within the tech industry.
Yeah. Yep. Tim?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of that. I mean, like my dad said earlier, it's important not to fall into either end of the spectrum, and we don't want to get giddy and carried away with the technology and think it can only be good things, but nor do we want to be kind of Luddites who turn our backs on the world and this extraordinary gift, that we're discovering in the power of computing. So I would really urge kind of believers, as we talked about earlier, it's about wisdom, it's about discernment. So get informed. There are lots of great places online where you can find out more about some of the technology, but also how you can discern what is true, what is false. What are the red flags that this bit of text might have been written by an AI rather than by a human being. I would love it if Christians became known as some of the most discerning, wise people online, rather than as some of the most credulous and naive. Well, maybe that is itself naive. I don't know.
No,
that's what you call a miracle.
A miracle. Oh, you guys are funny. I love your sense of humor. I would also say that if AI starts writing contemporary worship songs, you can't tell the difference because they all sound the same anyway.
I couldn't possibly comment.
Oh no! All right, I'll be nice. All right, Tim, if you wouldn't mind, I want people to know a little bit about, especially my American audience, North American audience, about Premier Unbelievable, the Premier Christian newscast that you do, as well as Matters of Life and Death, because I've watched a bunch of the episodes. And you guys actually do a really great job of exploring various topics that Christians are interested in. So for those of us on the other side of the pond that are not too familiar with you guys, tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Thanks. Yeah. So it kind of, the main thing is the podcast Matters of Life and Death. That's a weekly show that me and my dad do, coming out every Wednesday. And the basic idea is, he's the scientist, he's the researcher, he's the expert, he's read the books, he's done the stuff. And I'm the kind of the voice of the everyday person who's trying to wrap their head around this. So each week we take a big idea in science or technology or healthcare or ethics, and we say, what does this mean for ordinary believers? Let's understand it. But then we say, so what? What does it mean for us? How does it change how we live? How should we be thinking in this kind of confusing technological world we live in. So it's an attempt to try and help Christians kind of chart a course through some of this incredibly rapidly changing landscape we find ourselves in. And yeah, we've been really pleased at the response. It kind of grew out of this kind of lockdown project we started off our own bat a couple of years, 2 or 3 years ago, and then it's got picked up by Premier, which is one of the biggest Christian media company here in the UK. So it's really massive, expanded our audience. About half our audience comes from the States already, so we are reaching your fellow countrymen and women, which is really exciting.
Good.
We'd love for more people to subscribe and follow along.
I do recommend it. I enjoy it. And you can also check out their personal websites. Tim's is tswyatt with 2T's.com and then johnwyatt.com. And all the podcasts available at Premier Unbelievable. British spelling of Premier, by the way. Of course, yes. But good content, good, thoughtful content, and dealing with a really great range of issues. And so we appreciate that. I thank both of you for being here today. Wonderful conversation, wonderful insight. Finally, I got to do an AI program, so thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks
it's
very
been
much,
great to hear.
Appreciate all of you guys out there watching. Fun one to hit share on. And if you haven't hit like, follow, or subscribe, I would encourage you to do that. You'll get notifications of more good interviews. And we'll try to keep you informed. And maybe it'll be me next time, or it could just be an image of me. You never know. You'll have to come back and see it. We'll see you again next time here on Life Today Live.
Exploits